Welcome back to Beyond the Blox. This week we're looking at the future of Roblox avatars, from dynamic heads to wiggling fingers and toes. But first, we're your hosts. I'm Adam.
And I'm Anthony.
So there's been a lot of different announcements recently for changes to the Roblox avatar system. We've seen things about heads, we've seen things about faces, we've seen things about the actual way that characters are held together and that animations will be applied. And recently we also got an announcement about the rollout of some of these changing from opt-in to opt-out for existing experiences. So it's a very, very hot topic. I thought we could chat about it today and just go through all the different changes that Roblox have been talking about recently, and maybe sort of zoom out and understand why are they wanting to make all of these different changes. So yeah, we'll start with the avatar joint upgrade and kind of physics-based avatars. So this is a really, really interesting one if you've been interested in Ragdoll physics and wanting to replicate that on Roblox. They essentially announced back in January that they would be rolling out this new physics-based system using animation constraints and rigid constraints on characters that essentially when the character dies or when you choose to within your game, you can turn them into a ragdoll, which is something that previously was quite hard to do on Roblox with the default avatars. So we heard about that in January. You could turn it on by just flipping a switch in Studio, essentially. But the new part of this is that they're switching that from opt-in, where if you want that, you go and click a button, to opt-out for existing experiences. So, think of your favorite legacy experience that maybe hasn't been updated because the creator left the platform. Their game will now no longer, from May 2026, will no longer have your avatar fall to pieces like the classic RobloxDev, and instead it will ragdoll, and that might change some things for those classic games. So this announcement was put out with a sort of action required tag to let you know that there were a few breaking changes in here.
I will say what is quite interesting with this new feature is it's not just go into a ragdoll or be not a ragdoll, it can be in between as well. And you can have constraints on the amount of force that your animations can supply. So you can sort of ease into it, or you can have your character fighting back against gravity if they're falling. So I think there's a lot of really cool potential physics-wise with this. And I think this is, without a doubt, the best physics upgrade we've ever seen to characters. But there is a lot changing underneath the surface. What is it? R6 is going to be basically turned into R15, but keeping the visual aspect, but under the hood it will be R15, and everything's going to change. The attachments are going to be in different places, and old code might not work, and creators have got to they've got to update their game, and a lot of those creators back from 2008, 2012, they might not be around on the platform anymore, so we might just have a load of games broken.
Exactly. It's always a hot topic, I think, when Roblox make a change like this. And you can understand that it's very, very complicated to keep a lot of different character systems, a lot of different animation systems, all supported at the same time, and let players choose between them. As a dev, it's a bit of a headache as well when you're designing a game and people can be tall and small and skinny and wide, and now they can be all sorts of crazy shapes with UGC stuff. They can have variable different amounts of limbs and animation points depending on their preference, and often devs actually have to just try and limit that down and restrict what players can have, because it's just a lot to try and keep track of. And I think on the Roblox side of things, that's also true, and they're pushing towards this sort of very, very featureful animation character system, essentially. As you say, there's a lot that you can do with this. So it's exciting, but there's always that sort of pushback that you see, particularly from people who've been on the platform for a long time, who are worried about some of this backward compatibility. So Yeah, with this avatar joint upgrade, with this phase 2 that's going to be out in May, I mean, how many games do we think might be broken by that? I'm just trying to think. Obviously, visually, it's going to be different to what we've seen. If characters no longer fall apart, that's one of the classic Roblox sort of, I don't know, staples of the platform. There's the oof sound. There's the characters falling to pieces, looking like R6 and sort of feeling like Lego blocks. How many games do we think will actually be broken by Ragdoll being sort of enforced and being opt out?
There's plenty of people who think it looks better stylistically. And obviously they're not going to be too happy if one, it breaks their old gun system that's designed to work with Motor 60s and R6 animations.
It's interesting. I wonder if there's any games. I'm trying to think like if there's any first person shooters or any kind of simulation games where they sort of rely on you falling to pieces for anything other than aesthetic purposes. I don't know. It'll be interesting. I wonder if there's any games that sort of rely on the fact that you end up with 6 or 15 individual pieces for some actual functionality, and that disappears if you keep them all tied together and ragdoll when you die.
I mean, I think the falling to pieces thing has always been a bit of like, oh yeah, that happens. Like
sometimes it's a bit annoying.
Yeah. I don't think, apart from like, oh, we'll keep it that way because it was like that before. Like, I don't think it was ever like on purpose designed like specifically to do that. It was just, an easy animation to make. Roblox could just disconnect your joints and then fall all over the place. And oh well, obviously you can't control your character anymore, so your character must be dead. And it's it's a safe, family friendly animation. But there are other things that this new animation and unified rigging system is bringing, not just ragdolls. Apparently, your fingers are going to be able to bend potentially, and more articulation points, but not more parts.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting part of this phase 2 announcement that they talked about. So these animation constraints, which are essentially a replacement for Motor 6D, if you know how characters used to be held together, these not only support sort of traditional feeling kind of hinge joints, but they also support bones within the limbs that they've attached. So with still keeping 15 parts and still just keeping one part for your hand, you could have multiple bones in that hand to control the fingers. You could control your toes. There was an interesting sort of video on the post of someone sort of wiggling their fingers, and it's kind of creepy to think that might be what happens by default for Roblox avatars. But it sounds like it's an optional thing that you could do. It's not going to be enforced to have bones. You can just stick with the classic. I say classic. You can stick with the R15 articulation points and leave it at that. But I wonder if there will be any, we had Roblox using your camera to kind of see your face to do the dynamic heads, and we'll talk more about dynamic heads later, and using your voice through voice chat to animate the mouth. I wonder if there's going to be anything for VR users or controllers or something that will take input from your fingers and display that on your character, because I know that some VR headsets and some VR consoles can do that. They can tell what fingers you've got touching the controller or not and move the fingers on your character accordingly.
I know there are lots of hyper realistic games on the platform which have tried to they've made their own ragdolls and they've made their own more advanced rigs with fingers. I know back in like 2016 or something, I tried to make my own rig with more joints in it to be more realistic. So I think there is, and always has been, demand for it. It's just whether the question of, are we just going to turn and force everyone to use it straight away?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing on sort of the demand side of stuff, because you don't see those custom character controllers on a lot of the top games. It's quite rare to come across some of those high fidelity games in the vast majority of what you see on the platform, because if it doesn't matter for the gameplay, it's often a lot quicker to just go with the default. And I think that's what Roblox are trying to do here in general, is make the default really powerful and really featureful so that more studios can come to Roblox, people can make higher fidelity games without having to go that extra mile of inventing your own character system. But one thing we did see on this post was they very much emphasized the optional, characters, bold, underlined. This is optional for the bones and for the extra attachment points. I think they've learned their mistake from announcing things before and people freaking out, not knowing if it's going to be forced or not. At least for the extra articulation points and at least for the sort of breaking of the joints, it is optional. You can turn it to the old system. The only thing that's changing is the old system is now, you have to explicitly go and turn it to the old system rather than it staying that way for existing games. So that's quite interesting. I think the avatar joint upgrade as a whole is really powerful. I can imagine some examples from the games that I've created. Imagine a train simulator where you can get your arm stuck in the door and you've got to pull it out with so much force and whatever, some kind of crazy stuff that's just not possible on the platform right now. But yeah, we'll just have to see what people do with it. It definitely looks quite interesting from what Roblox have shown, and having bones be supported by the default character controller is a huge step forwards towards some of these kind of AAA quality character controllers that we see in other games. So I wanted to dig into the sort of the complete contrast between that kind of AAA incredible quality and R6 that is the classic Roblox, looks like it's made of blocks, very simple animation, and sort of dig into how that's all going to work in terms of supporting R6, R15, some of these extra bones, all sort of seamlessly as possible. Because Roblox have said that they will continue to support R6 avatars. And I think a lot of people are worried about that with dynamic heads and with these animation changes. People are rightly worried that R6 will disappear, that it will get completely removed at some point because Roblox doesn't want to juggle all these different systems. But their solution to this is adaptive animation, sort of a retargeting system that they've described, where you'll make an animation once and it will retarget itself to different avatars. So you'll make it for R15, for example, and it will automatically work out the best way to display that on an R6 character, or the best way to display that on a character that has bones that maybe weren't there when you animated it. And this is supposedly how they'll be able to keep supporting R6 into the future, even as they bring out these new features.
It sounds a bit frustrating though, because it's like there's a layer in between you and what's actually happening. Like it's a bit like designing an app for multiple platforms. Like if you're trying to make an iOS app and an Android app, you've got to deal with them both at the same time, rather than just being able to directly natively do stuff. And it means it's much harder to be precise. So I think R6 hardcore lovers might be quite upset with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a valid concern that we've seen as well, where is it truly saying that you're supporting R6 if it is fundamentally a different system behind the scenes? It might look and feel like R6. Is that good enough? Is that equivalent? Is the performance equal when you've got these extra layers and these translations happening? Is it truly the same performance as R6? Honestly, it probably is better, because some of the old Roblox humanoid controllers and character controllers are not very efficient at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow manage to increase efficiency whilst also having these extra layers.
There is a new character controller coming out.
Yeah, exactly. There's the new character controller. They're going to be using like input context. There's a lot of stuff that's changing, to be honest, and some of it might be forced where they think it has no functional impact or no visual impact, and some of it might be optional, and it's not 100% clear where we're at on that. But at least for now, Roblox have said that they will support stuff that looks like R6, and I think we'll just have to see what that really means when this retargeting system's fully rolled out. So sort of the three phases, I guess we talked about phase 1, phase 2. This latest announcement is phase 2, where this upgrade is the default for all experiences. Phase 3 is where animation constraints are the standard for all avatars across Roblox. So they will still support Motor 60s for legacy content, and existing projects that use them should function as expected, is what it claims. But they've said phase 3 animation constraints will be the standard for all avatars. So I'm not really sure what that means. I think it means maybe on the website where you can kind of pick between R6, R15, these sort of different avatar types. I think it means that maybe there your animation constraints will be the standard. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what the difference is there between phase 2 and phase 3, to be honest.
Well, in phase 3, the property is going to be removed. So there's going to be the avatar joint upgrade property is going to be completely removed. So all places will be forced to use avatar joint upgrade. So to me, that sounds like Motor 60s would be gone.
That does sound like Motor 60s would be gone, but
which makes sense, because why
it makes
would
sense, but it contradicts with their dev forum post, which says that Motor 60s will still be supported for legacy content, unless that's like manual exceptions.
Well, or it could be for now in phase 2 that Motor 60s are still supported, because why would they create a R6 model in R15 when they could just use the old legacy? If they were planning on keeping the old legacy system around, why would they bother remaking it in the new one?
I don't know if you've seen, for some other upgrades that Roblox have done, you've been able to ask to be excluded from it, and they've sort of, via Place ID, excluded specific experiences from an update. I wonder if that might be the way that they managed to keep Motor 60s on what they're calling legacy content. But we'll have to see when the phase 3 announcement comes out, I suppose, exactly what that means. But I think it's sensible for developers to expect that this is the new standard, that probably the sooner you can switch over to the new one and fix any of your systems that don't like the new system, the better, because I think this is one of those changes where Roblox is trying to get to a unified, consistent future for the avatars. One thing that I think will be interesting, and why I think they still want to support the R6 shape and look, even if behind the scenes it's different, is that I know for a lot of competitive shooters and obbies, it's actually really, really important that they have like a consistent avatar look. I don't know if you've ever played, there's like some experimental lab games that are quite fun to play with friends. There's like obbies, and a lot of sort of fairly basic shooters will just default you to an R6 avatar. It won't even look like you. All your accessories will be gone. Like, it'll just be a really, really basic R6 avatar. And the reason for that is like consistent hitbox, consistent physics. They can design the game around that one avatar size and shape. As I mentioned earlier, for devs, it can be a pain if you can receive all sorts of different shapes and size of avatar. And shooters and obbies are like a place where that is particularly apparent. So I imagine those kind of games will try and stick to R6 or whatever Roblox are sort of calling R6, even if it's a wrapper, around sort of this new humanoid rig system. So I guess, do you think there's ever a future where Roblox enforce the removal of R6? Like, do you think, they're supporting it for now? Do you think they'll support it forever?
No, I don't think so. There is a contradiction on their forum post, right? I mean, we're not, unless we're being total idiots, but I think phase 3 seems pretty clear in the fact that it's going to force everything to use the new system, which it will be R6 visually and collisions wise as well. The collision boxes should be preserved. So if people are using R6 for predictable collisions and they they set in the game settings, you can set restrictions on what size characters can be, then in theory that shouldn't have an impact. We did have one issue in our game back when we had our old physics system, which was quite unreliable as it was. But some people could purchase a certain avatar item, and it would somehow affect the either collisions or mass of their avatar, and they'd be able to just get in someone else's vehicle, like fling their vehicle miles and miles into the sky. So definitely a big problem. I think we're probably over like the crux of that problem. I remember there was like seeing almost daily like a new hat that someone was using in or a new avatar UGC item that someone was using in a game to hide themselves, or someone was like a plant pot, and then you'd hide inside their hat, and then you'd spawn kill everyone.
That's hilarious.
So, but there are ways to get around that if you don't want to use R6 as well. It's just what we did, but it involved quite a bit of coding.
Yeah, I think they're trying to roll out better avatar settings for games. I don't know if you've played around with that menu. It's a bit buggy, honestly, and they keep rolling back parts of it. At least the last few times I've tried to use it. But in theory, you should be able to decide whether or not sort of like accessories and different body types affect collisions, or whether they can look however they want, but it still keeps to the default Roblox avatar collisions. Like, you should be able to kind of turn that on and off with a flick of a switch in the avatar settings. At least that's the goal that Roblox are aiming for. Like I say, it's not been the smoothest rollout of that. So hopefully one day it will just be a couple ticks of some boxes, and you can have consistent collisions. You can have consistent visual sort of aesthetics for your game without completely restricting sort of the expression that different people like to have with their avatars. But it is definitely a problem.
It will be interesting to see where the animation editor goes with this, because obviously with the new characters with bones, I think the animation editor is a plugin that Roblox provides. They have done for many years. I don't know what the current state of it is because I haven't done character animations in a long time. But I wonder what angle they're taking on that.
Yeah, it is interesting. The avatar editor's historically not been the most intuitive thing ever for anything complicated, and I know a lot of people swear by Moon Animator too, and like that is their go-to for all animations, as it is very powerful. I've not played around with animating bones very much. I know that you can do it through the default avatar animation editor, so they might continue to use that. I'm not 100% sure. I have seen in a few tweets a new animation editor that looks a lot more complicated, that sort of blends different animations together and looks more like a node-based system. But I think that's where Roblox wants to get with this. They want to make an animation system where you can smoothly blend between different animations as well. So you can sort of have a strafing animation, you can have a walking animation, and I don't know, if you move your controller diagonally, it will do a blend of those two. That is something that they want to do. That, again, hopefully all these animation constraints help to achieve much more easily than you could do with the old system and the old animations. So I know that that's coming as well.
I have done weight pacing before as well, though not for avatars. But one thing that I found interesting that you told me the other day was that you suspect someone has been doing weight painting through AI, or perhaps some other part of the bone structure of one of the new avatars.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting thing that Maximum ADHD on Twitter pulled out. And this leads us into the dynamic head migration that just happened. So March 23rd, the full migration of dynamic heads rolled out. All legacy and classic heads and faces are now just dynamic heads. So faces just aren't a thing anymore. You have to get a dynamic head to change your face. and you can have different head shapes, and it's meant to kind of retarget all of the pieces of the faces onto different shapes. But yeah, what I saw some people doing was trying to reverse engineer and sort of work out what Roblox had done for some of these faces, because some of them look a bit weird, I can't lie. And sort of when they're in their default state, a lot of people look like they've just got a plain like flat mouth, sort of almost look like they're frowning. And for some of these faces, that's just a completely different look to what the person who originally bought that face wanted it to look like. So people have been exporting these dynamic heads and putting them into Blender to see what the different weightings are on the different parts of the face, the different bones. And there's got to be, for these new dynamic heads, like 17 distinct, I think, controls that you can have for the face, which is quite a lot. A lot more than just having a static 2D face. And there are a lot of faces that Roblox had to migrate with this. So there's a question of how did they do it, and some people suspect AI was involved. So this tweet from, as I say, Maximum ADHD, you might know him as Clone Trooper and various other things, on Twitter, on X, he'd exported these 3 dynamic heads, brought them into Blender, and the weight painting just doesn't really look like what you'd expect a human to create. Sort of the names of the layers, the names of the joints, and the fact that some of the layers of weight painting seem to just be like a random splodge off in part of the face for something that is otherwise a very symmetrical face. It's weird to have kind of a random blob over here on a layer by itself, and then another blob over there on a layer by itself. As a human, I think it would be really, really strange to go about creating the layers and the weight painting in that way. So that's where there's sort of this suspicion, maybe a bit of a conspiracy, that a lot of AI has been used to translate these heads. I don't think it's done a terrible job for a lot of them, and I think if AI was pretty good at it, then people probably wouldn't mind too much if they didn't find out. But I think this was like the cherry on the top for the people who are already like so upset about their faces being changed.
We hate this update, and it's made by AI.
Exactly, that's it. It was like one step too far, the straw on the camel's back. It's interesting. It's very, very interesting. At the very least, it seems to be automated, which makes sense for the scale of faces that they had here. But AI, sort of the non-deterministic side of things, is the suspicion because of these strange painting that people have found.
By the way, if you want to hear more about the Dynamics Head controversy as it came out, we have a third of an episode on that a few weeks ago. So do check out our channel and watch more of our videos. Anyway, back to the topic.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things with dynamic heads is it's just a different look for Roblox, right? Like, I think this is where some people find it a bit uncanny. Like, there's this uncanny valley kind of effect for some of these faces. Combine that with wiggling fingers and toes and all the other things that they're planning, and we could get some very weird looking avatars that might not look like Roblox. And interestingly, I think that's the point, right? One of the points here is to try and push towards a view for the platform that doesn't look like Roblox, enable different types of games to exist, because the Roblox aesthetic has been done and Roblox wants to expand and wants to take over more and more of the global gaming market. And so all of these changes seem to push towards that. It's, the uproar is, this doesn't feel like Roblox, you're changing the aesthetic that I like. And I guess the pushback is that's the point. That they're intentionally changing the style, and in some cases being more backwards compatible than others, but the intent is definitely to push the platform forwards to a character and avatar system that it hasn't had before, and so some people are just going to be upset by that.
I mean, are they trying to bring more users in, or do they just suspect that the people complaining are maybe minority, a very vocal minority? Or because I don't really understand what the vision here, because like Roblox is already an incredibly mainstream thing. I don't know how much more of the market they could capture. There's definitely some opportunity there, but I think that not
It's
pissing off my fan base would be a fairly big priority.
I think that's fair. I think it is quite mainstream in terms of brand awareness. A lot of people know of Roblox. I think, however, for an older audience, they probably have a different view on Roblox to the younger audience, and although they've heard of it, they might not necessarily play it. And so I think Roblox at the moment is still a small percentage of the global gaming market. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of AAA titles, there's a lot of genres out there that are just underrepresented on Roblox. And this is something I'm hoping we can cover in a future episode on the incubator and jumpstart programs that Roblox announced. But those are two new programs that are designed to bring people into the platform on the developer side of things, to make new genres and push the limits of what's possible visually on the platform, with the intent of bringing in new people on the player side. So a lot of 18 plus people who maybe are used to really, really realistic driving games, Forza Horizon type racing games, or really, really accurate simulators of driving, and very specific things like Euro Truck Simulator and Flight Simulator and those sorts of things. And we've seen attempts to recreate those on Roblox, but so far for most of those, you could put them side by side with the AAA titles on Steam, and they are different. They aren't the same. And I think Roblox wants to get to the point where those are indistinguishable, even to the point where they've been experimenting with talking to creators about what would you do if we could hide the UI completely and not have the Roblox icon in the corner. Like, Roblox are very serious about trying to get to this point where you could just not realize that this game is on Roblox when you see it on social media or somewhere else.
I mean, the pushback to that is really, do any of these AAA games have anything like dynamic heads? Like, is it something that people really want? I know people want realism and they want AAA games, but do they want their facial expressions broadcasted in 17 different ways? Is that something that anyone asks for? And is getting an AI to, or a person using loads of weights to do this, the answer?
I think those AAA titles have very human looking avatars. If you've seen some of the previews of like GTA 6 and some of the recent AAA titles like Battlefield and Call of Duty and stuff, the avatars, the characters that they have there look very human, and they have moving fingers and are able to grip things with their hand. And I think that's what they want to recreate. And I think it would almost be weird not to have a dynamic head for some of those more realistic looking characters, because you do want their eyes to move, you want their eyebrows to move, you want their face to move, that sort of thing. What's tricky about Roblox is they're trying to have the player expression and the UGC side of things and support these complicated avatars. And to try and do it all in one system, they've just smushed them together. And it's like, I don't think people who have a Lego looking avatar do want dynamic heads. Like, why would you want a dynamic head on a Lego looking avatar? It looks very, very strange and uncanny. But if they want one system, and that system needs to support human looking avatars where it does look like a proper face, then you have to have dynamic everywhere. And so I think that's what's led to this kind of quite strange situation right now. And I think they're trying to bring in some of these studios and entice them with all of these features so that we can see what all of this is actually pushing towards. This kind of AAA vision, massive worlds that go on and expand infinitely, and these crazy looking avatars, 4K textures, PBR textures, all that sort of stuff. And I think Roblox are pushing towards this goal so hard, because when we spoke to Dave back in January, February, whenever it was, and we asked about kind of the genre expansion and the AAA studios, and I think the answer from Dave was something like they have to, right? Like he felt that they had to do this, that they had to expand into it. And when asked how, I think AI was one of the ways, a big way, that they were going to democratize the ability to create this content, rather than just relying on pulling in existing AAA studios and expecting them to drop a lot of money on moving over to Roblox. It was, how can they make Roblox native creators also exploit some of these features? And AI was one of the ways to do that. And even as recently as that game jam we were talking about, where there were prizes for novel AI, I think this is definitely a push. The question is it the right answer? Do all of these AI technologies actually help indie developers get towards AAA quality?
Yeah, I mean, it comes at an interesting time because there's so much hype about AI, but then last Tuesday, OpenAI announced that they were shutting down Sora. Um, and they've said that ChatGPT is no longer going to make video content if you ask it to. They've cancelled a $1 billion US deal with Disney. So Disney were going to apparently use Sora, and there's lots of fears to artists that they were potentially going to get replaced by AI, and lots of people were saying, "Oh, you're an artist. Oh, good luck. Find another job." But now it's all gone, just like that. And they've also scaled back their plans to have this sort of adult ChatGPT if you age verify. So I think these things could be coming from a safety perspective, because both of those things potential to go wrong, but also does it generate something productive? And these two questions are really, really relevant for 4D generation on Roblox, and even just Roblox's vision for how they're going to use AI to assist creators. And then you've also got to remember that current copyright laws do say that if you use AI to generate your game, you don't own your game. So there are problems.
It's an interesting time, definitely. I think we've got to the point where the models are really good, and now it's sort of a question of, but how do we use them? Do they actually have a place in the future of gaming, in the future of society? I'm curious why OpenAI abandoned Sora, and I wonder if it's any one factor or a combination of them, because I imagine video is expensive. And there's also the safety.
15 million a day.
I mean, that's crazy. And we know that ChatGPT is not that profitable because they've been talking about putting adverts into chats. Like, that's something that I think Anthropic hit back at and sort of said, well, we won't put ads in our chats. So there's definitely the cost part of it of trying to be profitable. And all of these AI companies, a lot of them are absolutely hemorrhaging money, relying purely on investment for now. And at some point, we're going to see the prices hike, because at some point, investment money is going to run out and they're going to have to start become profitable. And that's what you see on, social media did this 10, 15 years ago. Everything was free. There weren't very many ads. And now you can't scroll 2 videos on Facebook before running into loads of ads. On YouTube, it feels like the ads are doubling every week. Like it's these companies need to become profitable now because they've got you hooked in, and now they make money. So I think we're going to see that from a lot of these.
I don't. Do you know the term, Adam?
I think I know the term that you're talking about.
The term enshittification.
Yes,
I don't know if you want to include that.
It's they're all going to go that way eventually, and it's a question of when all of the dust settles there, what do we end up with? And I think that's interesting because on Roblox's side, all the tools that they give us are free. Like, everything's free to begin creating on Roblox. You can make money without spending anything. You get a bunch of data storage for free. You get all the servers for free. I mean, I say for free, they take a decent portion of the money that they get spent on Roblox. But to give us AI tools for free where you can create AAA quality textures and AAA quality worlds and gameplay with the assistant. I don't think the assistant is there yet, but surely that's going to get to a point where they either have to restrict that or start charging for that. And then there's a question of whether it truly is a good tool for indie developers. And we saw real-time dreaming. That's something that Dave has shown off before on podcasts and on Twitter. This idea of, could there be a world where either creating or even playing the game is just you walking around and prompting a real-time video generation, essentially. And it's interesting that, that idea is essentially Sora on steroids, right? It's like Sora, but instant and unlimited. It just keeps going and going and going. And if OpenAI can't get Sora to work for a few seconds of video to the point where they axe it, how can Roblox turn that into a full experience that you could play for hopefully hours at a time, right, is the goal. If they're going to try and capture 10% of the global gaming market and they want AI to power AAA feeling experiences, it needs to support hours of gameplay, and that feels like a big challenge. I think where AI probably does have a place is probably in the avatar setup and sort of these jobs that are quite difficult. 17 articulation points of the face, multiple articulation points on the body. I think Roblox's avatar auto setup feature is AI powered, and that is quite powerful. And I think that's where AI will probably settle out of all of this. It'll probably be the tooling side of things for very specific cases where it is much better than a human or is much, much faster than a human. And for areas where it's not that exciting, right? You've done the hard work, you've done the artistry of designing the face, and now you just give it to the AI to sort of rig that all up for you and do the final steps. And I think that's probably where we'll see AI surviving. And I just don't think it's profitable for the full real-time, quick enough and expansive enough to run whole games. I think that's my prediction anyway of where all this is going to land.
Well, that brings this discussion to an end. Hope you've enjoyed the discussion about Roblox's new avatar system and about how we suspect they might be using AI and want you to use AI tools. That was just the cherry on the cake for a lot of people of this whole transformation, potentially removal of legacy systems, but in what they promise will look the same. So that's all we had for you this week. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a like on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and give us your thoughts. I think we had some really spicy opinions today. So let us know in the comments.
Beyond the Blox is produced by Seb Jensen for Last Level Studios. Watch on YouTube or Spotify, listen wherever you get your podcasts, and catch updates every week on TikTok and Shorts. Visit lastlevel.co.uk/podcast for more.